they are, and correct me if I'm wrong, Gaurav, they are in joint venture with the landowner.
See, these are the
50% that I know.
It is not part of our industry, what I can talk about.
Maybe not in your segment, obviously there is nothing.
But majority cases. So he is saying 50%, I would say more than that.
Joint development model, what I have heard is, it comes in the past 2 or 3 years. From a Bombay perspective.
No, it's
10-15 साल से तो करते
No,
हैं.
it's been there, but if you talk about on a scale perspective, the model's been historic, definitely. But if you talk from a scale perspective, we majority see people buying out land and then developing, rather than going in for a historical model.
I'm not talking of NTC sale. Yes, people have paid last rupee for it,
Yes.
and they're developing. But otherwise,
The other modes have been used by the developers, but that is the only option if you want to be a developer. They do the pre-sale, they take money from...
No, and cost of equity, if you have to take into account the industry today, everyone knows what is the cost of equity if you have to raise it from a private equity player. Number one, is it available? Number two, if it's available, at what cost? So if you strictly adhere to that ratio, you don't take advance sales into account, the cost of project will be so high that it will become unaffordable for a customer at the end of the day.
I'm a little curious,
Like,
because I remember 2008, all the major funds in the world were lining up for Indian real estate. And today we are having this discussion in just 4 years. How did that happen?
I'll tell you how it happened.
Pranay will be explaining.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, because you're the
Okay.
industry observer.
Now,
Yeah.
I will not take names, obviously,
Yeah.
but I know a retail player, okay, who's into malls. He made estimates of what he will do in the mall,
Yeah.
how much he will sell in the mall, right? Let us assume, I'm giving an example. He expected to sell 1 crore per month. Example, all right? He took 5 years receipt, discounted it, and took it upfront from the financier. Okay? So he got whatever, 50 crores against 60 crores. Again an example, very broad numbers. All those estimates which were made went haywire. Blaming footfall, blaming government policy, everything, recession,
Yeah.
Footfall not translating into sales, a
All
whole
of-
lot of.
Yeah.
all of that. Okay. Now, he's sitting with 50 crores, which he has put into the second project. Second project he has done identical, he's gone into third project, so on and so forth. Now, all those estimates are not even 50%. Okay. So what does he do? He goes back to the financier and says, I was to repay you in 5 years now I'll take 6 years. Financier has no choice. अच्छा भाई, चल 6 साल में दे दो. Then the footfall falls to 40%. Again goes to the financier. Can't do it in 6 years, I'll do 7 years. Okay? The financier very grudgingly kind of agrees. There is a further fall in footfall. What will he do? He will invoke the security. Right? Not that he has much option.
Yeah.
But today, think of the developer who spent the money even before the sales took place. It's actually factoring of future sales. And that's the way the whole thing was kind of funded. Only basis an Excel sheet which had projections in it,
Absolutely.
with assumptions. Assumptions did not go right. One of the assumptions was FDI in retail,
Yeah.
which everybody thought would happen 2 years back.
Yeah.
All of us thought.
Yeah.
Did not happen. Whatever may be the reason. Today, you know the state of affairs. So that, coming back to the borrowing part, it's a risky game. And therefore, I'm coming back to the debt equity part. In fact, I want to talk about two things. One is the debt equity part, and second, an escrow account. I know it's going to sound very harsh. Sorry, Gaurav, but if you have sold the apartments and your buyers have paid you the money, let it go into a separate account to be used only for construction of what you're going to give it back to him. Now, if that money goes into a second, third, fourth, 5, 6 projects, he's not going to see the light of the project that he has paid for. This started 3 years back in Bangalore with one developer saying, I'll create an escrow account. And a lot of people believed in what he did. They gave him the money, they did the booking, and that project has fortunately come out on time.
It depends. In a place like Bangalore, the land cost is not very high. It is possible. Or in a place like Bombay, where 70 to 80% of your project cost is your land cost. If you ask, if you tell whatever receipts you get to keep them in escrow and then fund construction, it's not practical. So it can be done, but it should be taken into account how much is the land cost of that portion.
But I absolutely agree with you that this is the only way out if you want to bring trust into the developers.
But
That-
Mr.
that's-
Modak,
If that is not going to happen, the developer will have that itch to.
Because see, you all talk about
The amount of money to be kept in escrow is
but
very
Mr.
important. in
Modak,
this.
you're a developer. Tell me, how many of your colleagues would be willing to do it? Would there be will to do this?
I think in
We'll come to practicable later. I want to know, will there be will to do it? Practicable or not?
So without that.
I have my doubts
you
about the
not
will.
get-
Credi will run to every doors knocking, and ultimately not more than 20% will sign if you go by that.
No,
So-
will Credi agree? Will Credi want to do
Yeah.
it? I have my doubts about that. I have my doubts
So
about
when
that.
we say funding is not coming because of this ambiguity, that ambiguity, see, we all know and we all understand that there is a problem of poor perception and projection when it comes to real estate. But the
See, you know
but the
what?
point is,
Apart-
who is to be blamed for that?
See, apart from ambiguity, see, there are even at a policy level, there seem to be two things. One is there is ambiguity. Second, it looks like there are bottlenecks. And they can be two different things. I see some of it as actual bottlenecks. It's not necessarily ambiguity. Ambiguity you can sort out. You can see clarity. Bottlenecks, you can't just see clarity and sort it out. So as far as at a policy level, I see two things happening. Yes, there is ambiguity, but I also see bottlenecks. And that is a clear policy crisis on the part of the government.
So what-
Some of these policies
Give
are-
examples, no?
No, I mean even the land acquisition bill. I mean, if you take the industry perspective, and some of it I agree with logically. So you are thinking, if so many developers feel this way and they seem to make sense logically, how has that not feedback gone to the government? And why are they
Let's talk about the land acquisition.
okay?
All right. Do you know how much is under construction all over India? 300 million square feet. They are talking of pre-registration, right, for every project which is over 40,000 feet, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Right? If all of them were to be registered, there'll be a chaos. It'll be like the Madha lottery.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Systems will clash.
So many people, developers, will have to line up for registration that I don't think the government machinery will be able to take it. Okay. Now, if you look at that bill, why is it only talking about residential development? Why not commercial development? I mean, there are a number of those things which call for a lot of debate from all stakeholders.
Yeah.
Don't take only developers, but
Yeah.
take all the
Absolutely.
stakeholders, you know, and you will come up with an answer. Because I'm sure the government also has to go through a huge learning curve
Absolutely.
before they kind of implement some of these laws. Because there are two very important things, like you say. And to my mind, these two things are paramount for the real estate industry. Clarity and consistency. All right. Today, all of us know that if you go to Gujarat, you can't drink. But it is consistent for so many years. people accept it. They got used to it. So consistency even of a slightly bad law is more desirable than the flip-flops which you always have.
One more thing, everyone has to realize that real estate is a very local subject.
Yeah.
Like developers burn their hands and they got into different cities.
Yeah.
The government should realize it as well.
Yeah.
I'll give you a small example. Recently, due to some new environment notification came out, which talked about height of buildings being with respect to the size of the roads. It was taken out with respect to some construction in Kerala, but Ministry of Ministry of Environment has a notification pan India. They came out with a funny notification, that it became applicable in Bombay as well because it was issued from Delhi. It went to all states, and these are the guidelines you're supposed to follow. Now that notification we have to implement in Bombay, forget redevelopment, and open land development cannot take place. So even the bill, the central bill which is there, it has to take into account the local aspects. Real estate is a very local subject. Bombay, all development is based on CRZ or coastline. You have no land available. Redevelopment. If you don't frame policies according to that, you don't give relaxations, you're not going to see any development taking place in the city. You are not going to see any supply coming in. Prices will keep going up over a period of time.
And the clarity, I mean, we can give number of examples, but the developers here will tell you that you cannot develop a mall but it falls onto a road where there is VVIP movement. Now, not all the developers are fully aware of that. They don't want that VVIP to be hindered with some car coming out of that mall, and blocking him. So he must have a good sailing. I don't think many developers fully even understand some of these things to date. The way the areas, the way the areas are calculated, setbacks. Now, he will tell you about. If you go with a plot dimension to 2 architects, the chances are you get 3 calculations.
I think now it's changed a little bit.
Now with the new DC regulation.
Everything comes out of the DC.
I think you have to also take into account historical background of real estate industry. All of us know historically real estate was never a professional industry in the country. Before FBI came in 2005-3, it was not. So the industry was really fragmented. You had multiple level of small developers, doing real estate. It was more like a family business which was being carried on. It's only post 2005 when FBI actually came in, funds came in, people started professionalizing, that the know-how actually started about the industry. So a lot of calculations, a lot of mistakes happen because of the right infrastructure not being there. If you look in our country, what is the eligibility criteria for being a developer? There's no eligibility. Anyone can become a developer. Anyone can become a builder from tomorrow.
Worse, anybody can become a real estate agent. And he will call himself a consultant.
No, but are you suggesting an entry barrier?
No, we definitely feel from a redevelopment perspective, the reason redevelopment has slowed down is because, there was no eligibility criteria. Anyone could become, they just had to take the consent of people and they became a developer.
So will you encourage if the government comes out with an entry barrier?
Definitely.
You will support that move?
No, he's talking about regulation.
No, I'm talking about entry barrier. Anybody cannot become a real estate developer.
No, from a redevelopment perspective, definitely. That's when you'll see speedy execution coming in.
Okay. Atul?
As Gaurav was saying correctly, before 2005, maybe before 2000, it was more of finance power or muscle power, and it was very fragmented, and the way it was not professionally run. It was a seller's market. लेना है तो लो, नहीं तो जाओ. कल से 2000 रुपया बढ़ गया. That kind of stuff was there. Today there is a lot of professionals in this industry. There is a lot of maturity as far as this industry is concerned. Things have changed, and the perception has not changed. The problem is that
perception is still pre-2000, I would say. The
We
perception
keep
is still
working.
there.
I told you, like when I moved from education times to real estate, my family was up in arms against me. They were like, "What is wrong with you? All chor, uchakka. You'll be going for meetings alone as a woman." I got to hear that from my colleagues as well at work. So it was like unheard of.
But I think perception will change over a period of
Actually,
It has
what
started.
has happened is that even in the family-run business,
Yeah.
the second generation has come in,
Absolutely.
and they are educated. You know, they understand what is happening. In fact, this entire change to white
It's because of
is also because of that. You know, they don't want to handle cash.
developers becoming bigger. All of us know as your size increases, you make it more professional.
Yeah.
You have to stay away from these practices because controls issues will come up.
Right? P players are forcing the issue. Governance becomes an issue.
like if you talk about China, the perception is that cheap product and not good quality product.
Not good quality.
Even that is changing.
Yeah.
When you talk about Germany, best quality product. So the perception in the mind needs to change with the time. Even today Chinese products with good quality are coming.
Yeah.
Go to all products which are there in Europe and US are Chinese product with good quality.
And word of mouth works even in real estate. I know projects, where people have made groups on social media platforms because they were so disappointed, and that has affected future sales because people are just
Very
shying
active.
away from that.
It's become
So
very
word of
active.
mouth works in this sector as well, which is a good thing.
Social media.
Absolutely.
It's
Like you
very
said.
active. I
Absolutely.
think it's very active.
So it works both ways.
It works both ways.
Of course. That is there in any sector. That is there about anything. So.
Can we move to a second subject of rental housing? I mean, you want to take a small break, or are we okay? Whatever.
As everybody
Some more
agrees.
tea, maybe.
Yeah, CBD cannot place. Some of the retail stores are still paying 500 rupees as rent.
Yeah. You're right.
And the case is pending for the last 20 years.
Marine Drive, some of the buildings are like that. People are paying 1,000 or 500 rupees.
Majority of South Bombay. Majority of South.
So we are now coming on the second
Okay.
subject of this.
Let's talk about the rental housing. I have a question for the two of you. I've always seen that developers shy away from going in for development of rental housing. Why is it? And I am saying that in the context of what I've seen abroad, where huge amount of rental housing in a very organized fashion takes place. You can visit some of the sites and see, but take Post Property, for example, in the US. They have 500 complexes all over US, each one between 300 and 500 flats, only with a view to renting. These are all owned by REITs, and we can talk about REITs. But this is how I think they have addressed the problem. There's a basic truth about rental housing. Every city in the world has a floating population. And that floating population is not interested in buying in that particular city. They would rather rent it. Say a Mumbaikar has come into Noida to do an IT job. Why should he buy something? He would like to rent it. Okay? Now, he doesn't want to necessarily expose himself to a situation where he doesn't know who the landlord is or the owner is, what deposit he is giving, whether he'll get his deposit back, whether the broker is cheating him or not, anything like that. So, he wants a dependable agency that will organize the rental housing for him, and which is roughly the 1/3 of the population of every city. That's the floating population that we're talking about,
If we go to metro cities, more than that.
possibly. People who do not want to buy their houses, but they want to rent it. Now, in view of this background, I have this question for the two of you, starting with you, Gaurav. Why are you not creating rental housing in the city of Bombay?
I think finance, availability of finance is one of the major criteria, like you rightly mentioned. Internationally, you have a REIT kind of
can I turn this around? When you're talking of finance, you're talking about return on capital or just the ability to finance?
I think ability to finance.
Okay.
Look at it from a model perspective. If you go to your lenders and you try to sell them the idea that, you know, I want this much of debt for this project and I would like to lease it out over a period of time to get my values back. The model is not existing in the country, you know, the lenders will not support you because, you know, there's not been a history. So we need to create those kind of institutions also
True.
who are mentally prepared to help you get this kind of model in place.
You as a developer would definitely go out and create rental housing if funding was available.
And yes, definitely, it would be an option that we would have definitely looked at, you know, in case that kind of finances are available.
Atul, why have you not gone in for rental housing?
I think my answer will be quite a little bit different from your answer. It's not just a matter of funding, it's the returns on the funds.
Okay.
Like, first of all, today, if at all, even today, not many investors are buying residential apartment and they are more interested, you know, maybe 10 years back, the commercial was the best place to invest. It's because of the returns. Today, any person puts money, is looking at the returns. Okay. Today, with the kind of prices going up, the cost of any apartment, and if you give it on rent, the kind of return you will get over the period of time, absolutely there is a mismatch. So it's not making sense that there is not much returns, number one. Number two is that your question started with there is an organized sector in US and other part of the country. That is the second thing, there is no organized sector over here. We don't know how it works and there is no organized way of doing it. Thirdly, I think there were a lot of developers who have got a hospitality background. They started with service apartment. So it is more looked as a service apartment from the hospitality background rather from the developer's point of view. Developer looks at selling it rather than renting it out. For the simple reason, the kind of risk he has taken, he doesn't want to take further risk of renting it out and is not aware what will happen to the rates.
I think
So
it's a different business model
it's
altogether.
completely
No,
different.
the same developer is used to renting out a commercial office space, but he would not rent out a residence.
This is because of the returns.
Correct. So, according to him, funding is the issue. According to you, return on investment is the issue.
I think
Right.
what I meant to say was return is what of course important, but we are so far away from it that, you know, even thinking of returns is stretched because
Okay.
you know that kind of capital is not there to support.
Right.
Because then you get into opportunity cost kind of equation, in that what gives you better returns.
Right.
It has to be incentivized.
I want to add one more dimension to this, and that's the legal dimension. If you do make a place for renting, you give it out on rent, and if you don't get it back, do you have laws in this country which are strong enough to get you repossession? Not after 5 years, not after 10 years, not after 15 years, but now, if
No,
the,
problem
if
is
the
that-
tenant misbehaves.
No, I'm
No,
not
there's
saying-
another angle of human angle. We Indians genetically want to possess something. I mean, we unlike Western countries, for us, property and gold is the prime investment instrument. So that also is a bottleneck.
It's a bottleneck excepting for the floating population who's not interested in buying.
No, you're right. Answer
See,
to the
what he would do,
question.
I'm sorry, is that if he is coming from Delhi to work in Bombay, in Delhi he will buy a flat. He will rent it out, use that rent to pay the rent in Bombay. But he may not buy it in Bombay because he doesn't see himself staying in Bombay forever and ever. He wants to go back.
Okay.
Now that is my reading of the market. But the three aspects that we talked about, the funding, the return, and the legal aspect of getting repossession, are all issues which are resolvable. Let me first take up the return issue. I think what the Chief Minister had said recently, and something which should be debated, is that if you get a higher FSI for creating rental housing, would that solve your problem? Because he has talked about 3 and 4 FSI for rental housing. I think that's a great FSI to have, more than double
Not on double.
of what you can create, right? Now he says, go ahead, create the rental housing, and I will give you additional FSI. Obviously, we have to make sure that the developers don't misuse it, and in the garb of leasing itself on a perpetual way, then the whole system will be abused. But let us assume that it happens the way it was visualized. I think there is a way of bringing up the return to double of what it was.
I think MMRD had tried that by giving 4 FSI, out of that 2.5 FSI.
And MCHI promised 500,000 flats under that scheme, if you remember,
Yeah.
right?
It's not partner.
Anyway, let's not debate that, but I don't know why.
But I mean, beyond that claim,
That's
why
what
that could not
local
work
issues
out?
came into place, the
And you know
environment.
what, like Thane has 2 very successful, I mean, almost 30,000 flats are ready. In August they will get possession. And I have seen the builder, he's really reaped the benefits of that extra FSI. So it's not like it can't be
But that is
done.
not rental
And he's
residency.
and he's making money on that
But
extra.
is that
But
rental
even
residency?
in the-
Yeah, it is rental, it is rental.
But
That's
even
how
in-
he's gotten his
But
FSI.
even in the chief minister's thing, the rental part was what the government was getting it. From a developer's perspective, you see, he was still selling his portion, the extra incentive
Yeah.
which he was getting.
It wasn't the REIT model,
Yes.
and
It was more of creating low-cost housing stock,
right.
which can be rented by the government agencies to the needy.
Yeah.
I think the important thing for us to then debate is that if REITs were allowed into the country, would it really kickstart the rental market, the organized rental
That
market?
solves one problem of funding. The other problem which we were talking about returns, if there is an additional FSI, that will be solved by that.
Yeah.
Third problem which you talk about legal issues. Today it's not that there is no law in this country, but implementing those laws, it will take maybe 15 years, 20 years by the time you can vacate your property. So if that kind of risk is going to be there, people will not like to move on it. So if there is an assurance that you can vacate the property in maybe 2 months, 6 months, there has to be some time limit.
Now,
But this third aspect.
this problem,
Then commercial.
I think, is more for places like Mumbai, Delhi. But if you go to Bangalore, people very freely let out properties because they always get it back.
I think even in Bombay,
The state law is very strong.
I think even in Bombay, above a particular ticket size, the legal license is very strong. Above a particular level, definitely.
If your capital is more than 1 crore
Correct.
rupees,
Yes.
then you are not protected by the Rent Act.
Yes.
And therefore, people are kind of taking the
And they have
risk.
periods into account, 11 months.
And in fact, now you find that people don't stay put. I mean, we must be doing a lot of leasing. There is not a single case where somebody is misbehaved and not gone.
That's what I'm saying. It's a people learn the law. Today, I'm telling you, in spite of all those laws, you say that 11 months, everything. If somebody says that I'm not vacating,
No, but that can happen.
by using the
That
law
can
and-
happen in your retail chain also, but in your mall you lease it out.
That can happen in your office leasing as well.
Yeah.
That risk is there.
If leasing model can work successfully in office, in retail space, why can't it work successfully in housing? I think it's more of a